So a stick of RAM that cost you about $70 a year and a half ago now runs 3, 4, sometimes 6 times that. And for a while there, nobody could really tell you why or when it would stop. That is the mess we have all been living in. And then, kind of quietly, a Chinese company most people had never even heard of walked in and basically said, "We got this." That company is CXMT, and if things go the way the numbers are pointing, they might have just cracked the exact problem that has been draining your wallet. I am going to walk you through the whole thing. The shortage, the fix, the money, and the catch. Because there is always a catch. If you are into the kind of tech story where a total underdog crashes a party that 3 giant companies have been guarding for 30 years, do yourself a favor and tap that subscribe button right now. Because this is exactly the sort of stuff I dig into every week, and you really do not want to miss where this goes next. Alright, let me set the stage, the Great RAM Heist. Okay, so here is what actually happened, and it is honestly kind of wild once you see it laid out. For decades, the memory world has been run by 3 companies, Samsung, SK hynix, and Micron. Between them, they control north of 90% of all the DRAM on the planet. That is the stuff in your PC, your phone, your laptop, basically every device you own. Then, AI blew up. And AI does not want normal memory. It wants this special high-speed stuff called HBM, high bandwidth memory, the kind that sits right next to the big NVIDIA chips in data centers. Problem is, making HBM eats up factory space like crazy. Micron said a single gigabyte of HBM burns through roughly 3 times the wafer capacity of regular DRAM. So the big 3 did the rational thing for their bank accounts. They took their factories and pointed them at HBM, which left you and me out in the cold. SK hynix literally said its memory was basically sold out for all of 2026. Micron straight up walked away from the consumer market to chase AI customers. Samsung bumped the price of a 32GB DDR5 kit from around $149 to $239 in a single month. Some parts spiked so hard that distributors started calling it, and I am not making this up, Ramageddon. With certain components seeing 1000% jumps, Apple even yanked the high-memory Mac Mini and Mac Studio off the shelves. SK hynix internally thinks this could drag on until 2028. That is the problem. That is the hole somebody had to fill. So who is CXMT? Anyway, CXMT stands for Changshin Memory Technologies. They are based in Hefei, China. And here is the part that gets me. They were only founded in 2016. Think about that for a second. Samsung has been making memory since the 80s. SK hynix and Micron go back decades too. And this company that did not exist 10 years ago is now being talked about as the 4th largest DRAM maker on the planet. By the end of 2025, they had clawed their way to somewhere around 5 to 7% of the global DRAM market, up from basically nothing in 2020. They are cranking out something like 280 to 300,000 wafers a month. For a company this young, in an industry this brutal and this capital heavy, that is not normal. That is a rocket. Now I want to be fair here, because I am genuinely impressed, but I am not going to oversell it. On raw technology, they still trail the big 3 by roughly 2 to 3 years. They are running a 16 nanometer class process, while Samsung is pushing into the 12 nanometer range. So this is not them beating the leaders on pure engineering. It is something smarter than that, and I will get to it. The chips that change, the math. At the big China International Semiconductor Expo in late 2025, CXMT pulled the sheet off its new DDR5 lineup. And this is the moment things got real. We are talking DDR5 running up to 8,000 megatransfers per second in 16 gigabit and 24 gigabit densities. They also showed LPDDR5X, the low-power stuff for phones and laptops, hitting up to 10,667 megatransfers per second. And they did not just show one product, they showed the whole buffet: UDIMM, SODIMM, RDIMM, the server modules, the laptop sticks, all of it. Their G4 DDR5 chips had already been spotted out in the wild inside retail memory kits from a brand called Glowway, which is the kind of thing that tells you this is not some lab demo. It is actually shipping. Here is why this matters to you. Specifically, the exact products the big 3 abandoned, the everyday DDR5 for regular computers and servers. That is precisely what CXMT is now mass producing. They are not trying to outfancy anybody. They are filling the empty shelf. And an empty shelf with your name on it is a really good business to walk into. How they actually solve it. This is the part I find the most clever, and it is the real answer to the whole RAM problem. CXMT's move is not to be the best. It is to be cheap and available. Back in 2023, CXMT was already selling its DDR4 for less than what the big three charged. A memory analyst named Jim Handy pointed out something that made me laugh. Right now, the majors are pulling something like 80% gross margins on DRAM. 80%. So even if CXMT costs twice as much to manufacture, they could still run a 60% margin and still undercut everybody. The market is basically handing them a gift. So the play is simple. Flood the mid and low end with good enough RAM at a price that makes Samsung and Micron sweat. You do not need to win a benchmark to fix a shortage. You need volume and a fair price. And if CXMT hits solid yields on DDR5, which analysts expect around late 2026, they are set up to grab the consumer and server market that got left behind. That right there is how you solve the RAM problem. Not with magic, with supply. The numbers are kind of insane. If you think I am exaggerating how fast this is happening, just look at the money. In the first quarter of 2026, CXMT posted revenue of about 50.8 billion yuan, which is roughly $7.5 billion. That was up 719% from a year earlier. 719%. They turned their first ever annual profit in 2025 after years of bleeding cash, and operating margins reportedly shot up towards 70%. And then just this month, July of 2026, they pulled off the big one. CXMT went public on Shanghai's Star Market, pricing shares at 8.66 yuan and raising somewhere around 57.9 billion yuan, call it $8 billion. That valued the whole company at around $80 billion. That cash is earmarked for their next generation G5 process, for HBM, and for building even more factories. They want to push monthly capacity to 420,000 wafers by 2027. And they are talking about doubling it by 2030 and tripling it by 2035. I will just say it, a 10-year-old company pulling off one of the biggest tech listings of the year while the incumbents are busy raising your prices is a heck of a plot twist. The part nobody should skip now. The honest part, because I respect you too much to sell you a fairy tale. CXMT has mostly solved the commodity RAM problem, the DDR5 and LPDDR5X that goes in normal gear. The HBM problem, the AI memory that kicked off this whole crisis in the first place, that one they have not cracked yet. They are working on it hard. They are building 12-layer HBM3, and they have reportedly shipped samples to Huawei for its Ascend AI chips. But their HBM yields are estimated to be sitting somewhere in the 10 to 25% range, which is nowhere near good enough to sell at scale. Meanwhile, Samsung and SK hynix are already off racing on HBM4. And the US export ban on those EUV lithography machines is a real anchor, dragging on how fast CXMT can close that gap. So the fair scorecard is this. On the RAM in your PC and your phone, CXMT is genuinely part of the fix. And the price pressure they add is good news for every normal buyer. On the elite AI memory, they are a promising challenger, not a champion. At least not yet. Here is where I land, and I will be straight with you. I am rooting for this one. Not for any political reasons. I just think a market run by the same three companies for 30 years badly needed a shakeup. And more competition almost always ends with you paying less. CXMT showing up and refusing to play by the cozy old rules is the healthiest thing to happen to memory in a very long time. If they hit their yield targets, the RAM in your next build could actually get affordable again, and we would have this scrappy 10-year-old company to thank for it. I genuinely think we are watching the early chapters of something that reshapes the entire memory map, and I want to keep tracking it right alongside you as it unfolds. If this breakdown connected some dots for you, do me a quick favor and smash that like button. It honestly helps this channel more than you would ever guess. And go ahead and subscribe so you are right here when CXMT's HBM news drops, because you know that one is going to be big. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will catch you in the next one.